want to do another one. Hi, everybody. This is Jason Eagle, your natural health authority with another Healing Matters. And today we're going to talk about swollen ankles and feet. What does it mean? And the nitty gritty is could it be a low back injury or an upper cervical neck injury? I'm Jason Eagle. You can find me at strategichealing.us. Facebook, I'm Strategic Healing. YouTube is Jason Eagle QRA. Instagram, Jason Eagle, all that whole thing. Got a whole bunch of videos from the past, and I am a quantum reflex analysis practitioner and a soft tissue specialist. So I've been doing this for 27 years, and I can tell you part of it is working on people. But you see this people walking around. You see people with knock knees. You see people with the flat feet. You see people with swollen ankles, swollen lower legs, even swollen feet where it kind of bulges, or their feet look like they're just stuffed in too small of a shoe. So, as I said, where's it coming from? A lot of people know that it can have a lot to do with a cardiovascular issue, meaning your heart is having difficulty pumping blood. It is especially when it is a pillowing puffiness on the tops of the feet where those bones are. That is often a sign of cardiovascular issues, whether it be congestive heart failure or high blood pressure or poor venous return, meaning the blood flow's getting there, but it's not getting back. It's also a sign of lymphatic flow. The lymph tissue tends to pull down, or lymph fluid tends to pool down. So we'll get to where that comes from, but it also is a sign of kidney issues. So kidney issues, meaning the blood has to go through your kidneys, fluid has to be extracted out of your bloodstream in order to create what's called urine. That's where urine comes from. And so this excess fluid is when you have slow kidneys, when you have kidneys that are too tight, too jammed up, literally they're developing sand, which then turns into stones, or dry kidneys, people who are chronically dehydrated. They can also allow for the kidneys for the fluid in the upper body is different from the fluid in the lower body. Dry kidneys can also come from not enough oil. You think about dry kidneys as like a leather shoe or like a leather ball glove. If you don't oil it, it gets very stiff and it gets problematic, and it doesn't filter as well. Okay. So, but these are secondary issues for oftentimes what you see is a low back issue. I just saw this today on a relatively young girl. I would say she's probably in her 20s. You can see this in a lot of overweight people, but you can also see this in not too overweight people. So the first thing it kind of starts out is that are all kind of tied together is you can see that the knees start to become kind of knock knees. See this in really overweight people. The knees are knock knees. And we say, well, that's just because they're overweight. You can also see that the ankles start to turn in. So the flat feet, you can look at, again, walking around, you can see people walking in shoes. You'll see a lot of people. This is very common, I'm noticing, in a lot of younger people, their teens and 20s and stuff like that. It's very, very common where, you know, part of it is wearing too loose of a shoe or also wearing too soft of a shoe. But you see the wear pattern. They scrape their shoes down, and literally their shoes, if you were to look at them, they're kind of, instead of it being flat like this, they're kind of angled in because they wear them down. Now, where is that coming from? It's the muscles that are, oh, and the other thing that you see too, especially in girls, you see this is where their knees hyperextend. Instead of, you think about a knee that kind of bends like this, instead of it being bent or straight, it actually pops back. And you can see they pop backwards. That's what's called hyperextending. Okay. It's the muscles that control these things. And what controls the muscles? It's the brain that controls this thing. The spinal cord, the neurologic system, the computer. Think about C3PO as a robot, the things that makes the robot move, the legs, the arms, everything. Or also think about, like, say, Pinocchio, or Pinocchio if he had strings, like a marionette on strings. What controls the arms and the legs and the whole body moving is that neurologic system. And we would say it's up in the brain, but it's really not just up in the brain, it's through the whole body. Okay. So when we start to see these problems in terms of the knock knees, which then later turns into the poor lymphatic flow, the poor blood flow, the pooling, all of this other stuff, that has to do with this muscular control is losing control. So how did that happen? When we see this in younger people, we can say a lot of times this can be a birth injury. A birth injury. What's a birth injury? Sometimes babies, when they are curled up as fetuses, when they come out, so this is very common in what's called a breech birth. Instead of the baby coming out of the birth canal in natural birth the right way, they come out the wrong way, and it kinks their back. It does a back injury. We can even have this with C-section, because the thing is very common in C-section. You would think, well, that doesn't make sense because they didn't have their back being hurt when it's coming out of birth canal. Well, actually, if babies come out of the birth canal correctly, that squeezing through that birth canal actually squeezes the neurologic system. It pumps the neurologic system, which pumps the spinal cord. And the spinal cord is not just a cord. Spinal cord is surrounded by fluid, hydraulic fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid. And that cerebral spinal fluid, as the baby is coming through the birth canal correctly, through good contractions, and it's delivered correctly, what that does is it literally puts everything the way that it should. It extends, it squeezes, it puts the back, the whole spine in the right way. Especially if they're not jerked out by the doctor, if the doctor doesn't pull their neck out or something like that, which a birth subluxation, meaning that's what you go to a chiropractor for. And many chiropractors will adjust a baby, okay? Because you can, especially babies that are colicky babies or just whiny babies or really have lots of problems, lots of digestive problems, babies that, like the colicky baby that spit up all the time, that's a really good sign of a birth injury. And as I said, is coming out C-section without having those correct pressures, the baby's just curled up and then they open up the stomach and then they pull them out. So what happens is it doesn't have these pressures that are, and as the baby comes through the birth canal, they spiral. They actually spiral in the compressions. And if it's done correctly, what it does is it really puts everything where it's supposed to be. So a birth injury is one thing. Young injuries in terms of little kid running and falling and hitting their chin. A lot of times you can see little kids have like scars on their chin or scars on their eye or something like that, or on their nose, somewhere on their face. That can do a neck trauma, a back trauma, things like that. Okay, and then anywhere down the line, meaning starting from young all the way up to teenager to, you get, basketball, football injuries, all these different types of things. Meaning, when did it start? You can have it start earlier. You can have it even start like, if you look at the posture of a person, they were normal. Their knees were normal. They weren't knock knees. And then at some point it happened. That can be a relationship to that injury. Okay, which means the muscles don't work correctly. So first of all, the injury can be repaired. A good chiropractor is very helpful. Me, a quantum reflex analysis practitioner who will find what's called interference fields. An interference field is a trauma, a injury, and don't always think about a scar, to anywhere in the body, but especially in the neurologic system, in the spinal cord. And doing what's called the mud packs. The mud packs, what it does is it literally puts the magnetic field back in place. So the injury, if you see the injury in terms of a bad neck, a bad back, which is then shorting out the nerves, so the knees are getting knock-kneed, the vessels, the blood vessels that go through that allows that pooling of the blood, the lymphatic flow, because the lymphatic is run by the muscles too. So if we start to see these signs of the problems in the lower body, the legs, Then by fixing the neurologic fault, fixing the interference field, the mud packs essentially puts the magnetic field back in place, which then the body will grow back, or the body can be moved back by a chiropractor, massage therapist, or even more so, your own exercises. A lot of times you see this in kids and adults who, quite frankly, are very lazy. They have their head in a screen. They are watching Netflix. They are on a computer. They're not out running around. They're not playing outside. They're not doing any physical work. And so they're not using these muscles. Okay. They're not developing this stuff. So, how do you fix this? Number one, you fix it by moving and doing stretches. So sometimes you need help in terms of whether it be from a chiropractor, physical therapist, or quantum reflex analysis practitioner to turn the power back on. But once the power is back on, you have to move it. You have to use it correctly. So gymnastics is a great thing for kids and adults. I would not recommend people who like have these problems doing CrossFit type of thing. You can make it worse. Just out good walking outside, not necessarily on a treadmill, walking out in the woods, doing certain exercises like planks. You're developing the core, which is deep inside the lower back, but the core is also in the neck too. Um, you develop those muscles, what it does is it squeezes the spine, which then, if you have compression, if the compression is compressing on discs and compressing on the peripheral nerves, the compression doesn't make it worse, or in terms of building core exercises, core strength, doesn't squeeze it more. In fact, it squeezes it this way, it decompresses. So having good core stability, there's all kinds of different exercises, yoga, different types of stuff, the downward dog, these different types of poses, like I said, planks, squats, like the Indian people, and I mean like over people in India, where instead of sitting on a chair, they squat down. Having a squatty potty, so that instead of when you go poop or pee and sit on the toilet, you don't sit like Americans. You sit like the Japanese or the Europeans, which is your knees are up, and you can get a squatty potty, which allows you to have this posture so that the pelvic floor is in the right position. It helps you to have good elimination, but it helps to create these muscles to work better. Why do I keep talking about this? Because these are the deep issues of what we see when we have it. So let's go back to what we're talking about, which is, okay, if it's a cardiovascular issue, that will help with the cardiovascular issue. But what it will do is it will pump the fluid back up and then develop the muscles so that it doesn't fall down there and stay there, so that it gets pumped up and then it stays up there. Because the reason that we get this pooling is because these muscles are weak, and they don't have the ability to pump that fluid back uphill. So these are the real keys to. So again, when you see knock-knee people, just like me and other chiropractors and other physical therapists, massage therapists, when you see people out in the world and we can't help but look at, you see that and you go, that's a problem. So that's something to keep an eye on, and something that, how do you fix it? You get to the bottom of it. Until next time, this is Jason Eagle. Bye-bye.